The Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, what a great day. It's a very holy day. In fact, one of my favorite services is the Kol Nidre service on Yom Kippur. I find it very holy and set apart. Some of you may know I'm with the Salvation Army. I'm a Salvation Army officer. You'll be meeting at my place next week. And the musicians will really appreciate it. You can just plug in and play. And same with the overhead. You won't have to send anything up. It's all there. You can just plug and play. And the seats are a lot more comfortable. Welcome to the show. So we're excited that you're coming. And, however long the Lord tarries, we want you to know that you're welcome, and we're excited you can come. And, one of the toughest things in my journeys, I've been on this journey for a little while. In the Salvation Army, it's a quasi-military organization, and they have a college for training officers. It's in Southern California. Some of you may know where the old Marine Land is.
Oh, yeah.
And right above Marine Land was the old Marymount Women's College. And they gave that to the Salvation Army.
Wow.
And so for 2 years, you got to go to school overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watch the whales go by, and you can hike down, and the porpoises are there, and it's just a rough place to go to school. And it really gives you no real insight of what life is like as a Salvation Army officer.
And no incentive to graduate either.
Yeah, we don't even know where we're going until that final day when you're commissioned and you're ordained. And then in the afternoon they have an appointment service, and you're given an envelope and you're told where you're going. And I grew up in a dysfunctional household. I was part of a dysfunctional life. I was an alcoholic and drug addict for a number of years, and I got saved in a Salvation Army adult rehabilitation program. So that's really where I thought I was going to be involved in. That's where my classes were focused, that I was going to be involved in these youth centers and helping men and women turn around their lives. And on that appointment service, they handed me an envelope and they said, Don, you're going to go start the work in Littleton, Colorado for the Salvation Army. And I was like, what? That's not an ARC. No, you're going to do a church plant. I said, I didn't take any of those classes. You got the wrong guy here. And but it was a start of what I really believe God in His good and pleasing and perfect will allowed us to experience and be a part of, because we've never worked in the rehabilitation centers of the Salvation Army. We've always worked in the core life, now some 22 years later, my wife and I. But in the midst of being in Littleton, things just fell into our laps. God's grace went before us. Our very first church service, after 9 months of preliminary meeting, we had 177 people on our first service, and that was the lowest we ever had in Littleton. We bought a building, 20,000 square foot building, and things were going well. It was just, how are we going to pay for all this, right? And so one of the things we did, we opened it up for rent. We started a homeschool charter school group that met. See, if you did 5 days a week, I had to have sprinklers because it was a full-time school. But if I only did 3 days a week, it was a part-time school, and I didn't have to have sprinklers in the building. So I did 3 days of that, and then Friday was a dedicated homeschool day where we brought in all these homeschoolers and outside of the curriculum that we did Monday through Friday. My wife and I are big homeschool fans. But in the midst of that, they gave us a connection. Beth Messiah was looking for a place to rent on Saturdays. Now, some of you may know Beth Messiah. It's where Boaz Michael was involved and went to Shabbat services. And so that's when I met Boaz Michael back in 1994. And that's where this journey started for us. And it's always been difficult, the capitulation that comes through, because, how do you teach people these truths when they've grown up with the dogma of Christianity in some cases? And that's probably the most difficult thing that we have still today, even in the Salvation Army, that my wife and I have to deal with. I'll give you an example of this. This is probably the biggest appointment, responsibility-wise, my wife and I have ever served in. Tacoma, when we got here, it was about a $2.3 million budget a year. We're now well over $3 million, almost $3.5 million a year, budget-wise, in the things that we do. We have a family shelter, we have an overflow family shelter, we have a food bank, we have family services where we help with rental and utility assistance. And needless to say, my wife and I are bivocational. We're really busy. And we see, some 50,000 people in Pierce County every year come to us for help. So we've been pitching since I've got here for another set of officers to come and help. That have the same calling and the same urgency that we have to help these people. And so they just recently sent us a couple. Those moves came out on May 4th. May the 4th be with you. And it was funny. So our first response, we get back from their 2-year lieutenants. They've been out. You're a lieutenant for 5 years once you've been commissioned. And so they're new lieutenants, and they're kind of upset. They already have 4 kids, 1 on the way, so we thought that was great. But they already know everything.
Uh-oh.
I remember when I first got commissioned, I remember, who's the guy, open door, old guy in Pasadena, had a radio show forever. Anybody remember?
J. Vernon McGee.
J. Vernon McGee.
Oh, yeah.
He used to say, he used to say, because he'd answer questions at the end of his service, and he'd say, if you would have asked me that question when I first got out of seminary, I had an answer for you. But today, I do not. There's wisdom in that, and of course, these young lieutenants, they know everything. And so they've said they don't want to come to Tacoma because I'm too Jewish, and my wife is too liberal.
Liberal?
Liberal. And because we love everybody. The Salvation Army has this mystique of being against the gay and lesbian community, and nothing could be further from the truth. We help everybody, regardless of choice and desire. We'll help them. We have them in our shelters, whatever it needs to be. But anyways, the Salvation Army has developed a reputation that we don't help individuals who desire a different choice or livelihood. And so we really embrace those opportunities to be salt and light in our community. And Tacoma, needless to say, allows us many times and opportunities to be that salt and light in that community. And so in some cases, people think of us maybe that we're too liberal. And so it's just really ironic. I don't know what's going to happen. I've never had an officer refuse an appointment. I don't know what that means. Because if you don't have an appointment, you don't have a paycheck. I don't know or a place to live, for that matter. So I don't know what's going to happen yet, so you can keep us in prayer as we go. But I think one of the most difficult things, as my wife and I have been on this journey, and don't get me wrong, I know some of you are much farther along in this journey than my wife and I. Because of our responsibilities, we're not always able to pursue it as much as we like. But we got involved quite heavily and still are involved. We know Tim Hague. We came up for many wooden podium conferences. Our folks live in Chehalis, and so we would come up 2 or 3 times a year, and we would always bump up to Tacoma to attend Tim Hague's fellowship and that type of thing when we had those opportunities. We've been stationed in Littleton, Colorado. By the way, we went through Columbine. My oldest son was in the library, Chris. Horrific time in our lives. And also Chris, one of the few people, he was also in the Aurora theaters, and he was shot in the back, wounded in the back.
Oh, wow.
We know what, it's a trip. But a lot of experience we bring to the table, both worldly, spiritual, and one of the most difficult things we find is dealing, especially like when we go to a new appointment. I always think we're weird. You know, like we never have a Christmas tree in the sanctuary. I'm kind of big on that. Okay, and they're all, you know, when you're coming around your first appointment, you get there July 1st, and you start planting those seeds, right, about Christmas and the holidays. And I said, well, why would we have a Christmas tree in the sanctuary? I mean, isn't this a place dedicated to God, right? And
what a concept.
Yeah. And I said, then why would we sing songs like, oh, Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree? Of course, you kind of point them to Jeremiah 10 underneath the table there, and you sit there and you know. And so that's where the seed first gets planted everywhere we're at. But it's difficult getting them involved in seeing a broader picture, a Torah-based theology, and really what I believe is what we're called to in being a disciple of God, being a follower of the way. Because I think probably some of the difficult things with Christians as a whole today in dealing with the church, you know, Jesus tells us what? You know, follow me, right? And I will make you fishers of men. What must we do to follow him? We must pick up our cross daily and follow him. Even to the point where it says we must leave everything behind. Okay? There is no half measures avail us nothing. And that's one of the things I like about, for example, the Day of Atonement being so holy. It is different than any other day. One of the things that's difficult to ascribe to a general Christian is the concept of holy and holiness. They think of it as some esoteric type of thought, mantra, philosophy that no one can ever adhere to, right? Because we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and that's where they like to stay, because then they're never confronted with their life and their livelihood and where they want to go. But God calls us to live differently, right? To be different, to be holy. And that's how I describe it to them, is it's different, okay? And that's the root word, whether it's koinos and, not koinos, that's common. Whether it's hagios or kadosh in Hebrew, we look at that concept, and you know the definition for being holy, the theological definition is being set apart, okay, for some sacred, godly purpose. But it means to be different. Is really the root word. I mean, when we look at our Bible, you know, our Bible that book is different than any other book that we can get in the library. You know, we look at the Holy Lands, for example. That piece of real estate is different than any other piece of real estate in the world. And then us, ourselves, as we're to be holy people, we are to be different. You know, and if there's one thing in the Christian church today that just, it wounds my heart and soul, is that for the most part, our fellow brothers and sisters in the Lord, there's no difference between their life and the life of the world. You know, when the divorce rate is just as high. Do you know teenage pregnancy is actually higher now inside the church than it is outside the church?
Shocker.
It's crazy. And yet, you know, they think that, you know, they're redeemed. And you know, I just, like I said, it breaks my heart. So I am going to instill your help this morning. Okay? One of the things that I wrestle with is trying to show them and teach them what discipleship is really like. So I've put together some notes, and you have them there in front of you. And so you're going to be like, how would I say?
Guinea pig.
Yeah, the guinea pig. That's perfect.
Wait a minute, isn't that unclean?
Huh?
Aren't guinea pigs unclean? I don't know.
Yeah, that's another thing. I don't want to talk about that. That would be bad. And that's another thing. You get to my wife and I have been observing a biblical diet. We're not kosher, but we observe a biblical diet. We've been doing that for 16 years now. And that's a whole nother mantra to change. You know, our Sunday afternoon meals, we get, you know, people bring things, and I don't like potlucks. typically, unless you go to something like an Oneg and then you can trust in what's going to be there. But is teaching people about their meals, teaching people about what real holidays are, calendar, the cycle of sanctification that we can be involved in. It's just a whole different quality of life that people look at me and go, he's too Jewish, right? They want nothing to do with this. So I appreciate you embarking on this with me this morning. Leo Tolstoy, he wrote it like this: a man's whole life is a continual contradiction of what he knows to be his duty.